with the elections this last week, I thought it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, as someone who's constantly looking at the election cycle and looking at the outcomes of races, and sometimes it seems to make a little bit of sense, but other times you're like, that just didn't happen. Let's just take Wisconsin, for example. Wisconsin passes one of the most conservative measures to literally change their constitution by an overwhelming 500,000 votes to include voter ID on the Wisconsin Constitution. That is a conservative measure, guys. That's not something the Democrats have been chasing, okay? They don't care. Remember, they just had a massive push to allow as many illegals into our country as possible, give them driver's license, and oh, by the way, allow them to vote in our election, okay? This is not a Democrat position. It's not a liberal lefty position. It is a conservative position. On the same ballot are our Wisconsin Supreme Court justices. And you're telling me that on the same exact ballot, the liberal, leftist, lunatic Supreme Court justice wins by more than 220,000 votes. There's some discrepancies there. Some people are saying as little as 140,000. We'll see how it all washes out. The point is, you're telling me that overwhelmingly 500,000 more votes to change the Constitution to include voter ID, while at the same time the conservative Supreme Court justice candidate loses? I don't think so. That would be what Mike Lindell would call a major deviation. So we have to talk about this. Okay, we can't just go hide under a rock. And unlike what Turning Point is putting out there saying, we just need to vote harder, Daddy, I disagree. I've watched this cycle over and over. I've watched this narrative over and over. Just chase the ballot harder. Just vote earlier harder. Just grab up all your people harder, and we will win something. It is the machine's dummy, to quote Mike Lindell. That's certainly a major part of it that they still continue to refuse to acknowledge. You ask Scott Pressler, we just need to extend early voting and get every conservative out there to vote early. Dismissing the reality that voting early shows the numbers. It shows how much you're going to need to make up for. I mean, this is just basic common sense stuff in elections, and yet he is continuing this message. Well, I saw a tweet, and it kind of like rocked my world, because a lot of us have been having this conversation. We want to like Scott Pressler. We're like, he cleans up cities. That's really cool. Appreciate that. I've been a supporter. We've worked with TPUSA. Tyler Boyer has been an acquaintance for sure, a friend, I dare say. And I want to support them. I want to be about what they're doing on the college campuses and voter turnout, that stuff. I want to be a part of that. But the narrative that keeps being driven and the money that is funneled in to support tactics that do not work is very alarming to me. The 2020 numbers and the 2024 outcome numbers for President Trump in the presidential election barely differ. Barely differ. The same people who came out in 2020 came back out again in 2024 with very little deviation, by the way. Nothing substantial enough to say that this get out the vote early campaign and ballot chasing campaign was effective. And I got to tell you, when Scott Pressler tried to take credit for Pennsylvania's legislative changes that saved their elections for 2024, that's really for me when I began to kind of raise my eyebrows about this whole situation. He was not responsible for the election outcome in Pennsylvania for 2024. And it is a slap in the face to all of the grassroots activists. Audit the Vote PA, by the way, I'm looking at you, all of you amazing mothers and activists out there who have worked so hard to actually change the Pennsylvania law in order to prevent massive voter fraud. That is what saved the 2024 elections in Pennsylvania. So I see this tweet and it kind of rocks my world. And I'm thinking for a second, this tweet seems to be indicating to me that there's literally a manipulation happening here. And it's suggesting that practices employed by the government are being utilized in our grassroots election movement. And I thought, this is crazy. This is wild. So I kept reading. And you guys, I want to take the time today to present this person to you. His incredible investigative research is very compelling. He is not coming with feelings. He's not coming with that, some bad taste in his mouth for the personality of Scott Pressler or Turning Point. It's literally looking at the data and seeing what the results are bringing forward. It's looking at the connections and the ongoing false narrative that if we just do this harder, we might actually win. It also looks at the amount of money that's being spent on failing campaigns when the data demonstrates there is no significant gain. Not even significant, guys. There is no gain to be found in these efforts. And as someone who's deeply concerned about elections and securing our election platforms, I don't like it when people preach a false narrative that makes the citizens feel that they don't need to really do anything beyond go chase after ballots and knock on doors to secure our election. Those things have their place in time, but I want to introduce you to Brian Ference. He is an author. He is also the host of the MAGA Mind podcast. And again, I was completely compelled, Brian, by your research and your investigative journalism, which there's just very little of it. The fact that you can organize all these ideas and put them together, and they have quote receipts.
Thank you,
so
Sharona.
And thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And as you mentioned, magamindpodcast.com or brianference.com. I'm also on X at brianference1. And it's just a pleasure to be able to talk to you and, share some of this evidence and some of this research that's been done, not only on, Scott Presler, but some of the other activist groups that have been pushing early voting, pushing mail-in voting, pushing ballot chasing, despite the data revealing that they're not effective.
Yeah. If I can, before we get into this information, I want to remind the public where our president stands on this, okay? So just take a listen, and we're going to see if what Turning Point and Scott Presler's antics, if they line up with President Trump's agenda, because they claim to be, wanting what's best for the country and working on the quest of President Trump. Let's take a listen.
And it's so easy to do it. And we should go to paper ballots. We should go to one-day voting. We should go to voter ID. And just one other thing, proof of a thing called citizenship in the United States. Wouldn't that be nice? How simple does that sound? Proof of citizenship, voter ID, one-day voting, and paper ballots. Paper ballots are very secure. They have watermark paper. It's very intricate stuff. It's very technologically advanced, even though it's paper. And you'd have no trouble. You wouldn't have dishonest elections, and you'd have them all done by 10 o'clock in the evening. France went to that, and not that I want to copy anybody, but many others have also. And they had 38 million votes, and it was all done at 10 o'clock. They had a winner, they had a loser. That was it. Nobody was complaining. And they had it backed up with paper. And it's so easy to do. The other thing, you'd save about, this would cost you about 8% of what the machines cost.
Okay, 8% of what the machines cost, and a lot less money than everybody's paying Scott Presler to go chase ballots. So, Brian, let's get into it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I'm in Maricopa, Arizona, which is famous for its election fraud. In Maricopa, Arizona, we've had the machines are always malfunctioning during Kari Lake's Senate race. The machines were all broken. None of them were working, and only in the Republican heavy district. So, if the machines, go ahead.
Seriously, she could not catch a break. It was just unbelievable. And conservatives in Maricopa County, it really is something that I hope the U.S. Attorney is finally going to investigate, for real. So you've been involved. You're deeply involved in the GOP there in Arizona. You're not a Johnny-come-lately. You're not somebody sitting in the basement trying to demonize the conservative movement. And I want to be really clear about that. And those of us in the election world have had our concerns about Scott Presler for quite some time. Okay. And so it's not new, and people will say, Sharona, he's so sweet. He's so nice. He's out there doing great things for the community. That's awesome. He should keep doing that. But when it comes to this, let's get into your initial tweet that I saw. I'm going to just post this up. I want to encourage everybody to head over. I want to encourage everybody to head over to Brian's site on X, not right now, after we're done talking, you guys, but here is his account over on X. Everything is there, but let's take a look at this very first tweet that caught my attention. And I actually believe we shared this in part in our LOF email, because you gave great data on the actual organization that made a true contribution to the 2024 election. So I'm going to just put this up so everybody can see where we're coming from. All right, let's start with this first. How it's possible for Scott Presler to have such a massive audience and such a massive reach, and anyone who kind of comes against him or starts to talk about what he's doing is immediately shut down. How does that work?
Well, then that's very interesting. And I did send you also the paper. It's pretty interesting. Scott Presler's father, Robert Presler, commissioned, because he was an intelligence officer in the military. he commissioned a paper that was given to him. And basically in that paper, let me actually bring it up here on my screen too, so I can go into just a little bit more detail. Let's see. So that's the intelligence one. Yeah, let me go over here. Sorry about that.
No, so this is, again, people are not used to me getting super technical, and we want to make sure that they know everything that you're saying right now is backed by evidence. And it's up to us, the people, to look at the evidence and decide what we believe about what's happening. President Trump has made it very clear what he wants. Right. And there's a whole different narrative being peddled by Scott Presler. And it just proved once again to be unsuccessful, wildly unsuccessful.
Right.
And so, yeah.
So if you click into that article, there's a graphic that I'd like you to show on the screen, and it's an image of Scott Presler and his father, and also his father's LinkedIn. It's kind of in the top there. Actually, it's in that header image, so that's fine. Yeah, you can zoom into that. So what it shows is, Robert Presler. He basically has a military information background in counterterrorism in the defense security global force planning at the Pentagon, and then eventually was director of information operations in the Department of Defense. So he commissioned this report, and if you go into the report, it's called Improving C2 and Situational Awareness for Operations in and Through the Information Environment. So that's a long title. But if you go into the paper, it's about a 100-page paper. It describes, the information environment, but what it talks about is influencing political outcomes. So it's influencing political opinions, influencing political outcomes, and the strategies used. This was written in 2018. It mentions things like mimetic warfare. Mimetic warfare is a form of modern information warfare that it's psychological warfare. It uses memes. So, those little graphics with little text on social media to influence public opinion. That's mentioned in the report. It also talks about, specific techniques, which we were also seeing that Presler and his supporters seem to be using. One of them is called flaming. So basically, flaming is inundating a post with a whole bunch of users saying, this is wrong, this is a lie, this person is amazing, like you're an idiot. And in the report, it mentions that the initial reaction is to make that poster hesitant to post something like that again. It suppresses them. It's kind of like eliminating, the effect of friendly fire. So this is all detailed in there. On page 88, that's on page 14. It says, direct quote, when a post by a user has been met with an inundation of it says opprobrium or flaming by other users, the initial user may be hesitant, suppressed to post again, expressing similar views. And then on page 88, it says, additionally, social media platforms were infiltrated by foreign bots and automated retweets. An analysis that fails to account for these facts would have a negative value. It would mislead instead of inform. And then this is the last quote from there that I'll read. On page 97 to 98, it says a critical purpose of direct automation as a force multiplier. It allows quicker reactions and basically uses automation seen in Russian factories with people overseeing propaganda and troll bots. These are AI bots running multiple accounts that are nearly identical or have slight variations of the same message, perhaps via automated rephrasing. And the sheer volume of content posted on social media is possible only via automation, with reactions and responses controlled manually. These are near MADCOM processes, and they suggest how hard it would be to distinguish between sophisticated, fully automated propaganda and human-generated propaganda. So basically what that's saying is there are specific techniques dated in this report, which Scott Presler's father, Robert Presler, in his role as director of intelligence, commissioned, and it's mentioning specific techniques. And then what we've seen is these have been used by Scott Presler or his supporters. You're showing on the screen there's something about Scott Presler's brother. That's a whole nother can of worms. But there was one graphic that I sent you, or a link rather, and it talks about the bot and AI and influencer swarms for Scott Presler. It's a separate link, but it shows screenshots, which I captured. Yeah, there's one of them. It shows.
Yeah, let me do this one. Hang on.
Sure.
It's kind of great because everything is literally in one link, you guys. So you really can see it all in one place. You're not going to have to hunt for it. But this right here is what's very interesting. And maybe if I can just interject for a second. For those who are watching and saying, why does this matter? Because whenever a narrative is being driven that's not organic, you have to give pause for a second and just ask why. A message has been put out that's not organic. It requires AI, it requires bots, it requires government intelligence, which again, there's nothing wrong with Scott Presler's father being in the government and being, the highest rank in his division of psychological warfare. Okay, that's fine. But there is a problem when it's being used on the citizens to advance an idea that doesn't work and that is proven to fail over and over. And you realize that the majority of people are being manipulated by these tactics. That's not honest. That's not forthright. We don't use manipulation tactics with what we do. We prove it by the results. And to have somebody like Scott Presler being funded out the wazoo, by the way, millions and millions of dollars to do this work that he's doing, to manipulate the masses and making it seem like it is the pervasive, most popular idea because he's using technology to shut down other people's opinion. Again, on social media, just to remind you guys, if you have too many negative comments, it messes with the mind of the creator and they say, I'm not going to post anything more like that, even though we should be doing more of it and asking more questions rather than allowing someone like Scott Presler to continuously shut down conservative accounts and shut down open dialogue about his practices. And that is what's been happening on a very big scale. Is that right, Brian?
That's correct. And if you click through on that post, because there's multiple screenshots of it, this is a specific phrase that was used, and it's Scott Presler is a national treasure. And I've highlighted it in yellow there. So between, I believe it was February 7th and February 9th, and this was a response. There was several posts that were saying, Scott Presler needs to be ejected from the MAGA movement. There was just some criticism of him. So this is a direct response to that in reputation management. So those are screenshots of multiple posts between largely February 7th and February 9th, all saying basically the exact same thing. Scott Presler is a national treasure. And as it mentions in the Department of Defense paper, the thing that's applied is some random modification of that phrase is rearranging the order, adding a word here or there. And if you scroll down, I believe, scroll down a little bit more because there's pages and pages of that's one screenshot. But just scroll down a little bit more. Did you click through to that, or is that an image? Okay, yes. Keep scrolling down. So
here's more.
So just slowly keep scrolling because there's about 9 screenshots of that. There's one. There's another one. It's highlighted in yellow. They're all using the same phrase. Scott Presler is a national treasure, or like a very small variation. And the paper specifically points out that they wouldn't all be bot accounts, right? It's supervised by human managers, and some of them are manual. And then, of course, there's a certain percentage of the population that are easily propagandized. They'll believe anything they're told. So just naturally, they will pick up on this phrase, Scott Presler's a national treasure, and they'll start using it. So then there's some real posts, natural posts, and that's just been conditioned in them. So they're going to do that. But these are all posted on the accounts of people who were questioning Scott Presler, who said, he needs to be removed from the MAGA movement. And so this is like the flaming that's mentioned in that report to Scott Presler's father. We've seen this so many times being used by Kamala Harris supporters, either pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia. There's these flaming swarms like this, and it's almost identical comments over and over and over. So this is a widely used military tactic. And then the kicker is what you'd want to do is then pay a couple large influencers. You may have heard that Snap Soda kind of scandal. There were some large right-wing influencers that were paid through an agency to question, why are we paying for, through the SNAP government program, basically welfare? Why are we allowing these people on this program to purchase sugary drinks? And so there was the lobbyist from the soda companies reached out and paid key influencers to say, no, this is a violation of our rights. Let them buy whatever they want with that government funding. So it made it seem authentic, but it really wasn't. And they used the same phrases. It was very clear to identify, okay, this is a paid sponsored post. So if you use this bot technique, this swarming, and of course you have some, loyal, cult-like followers, and then you have some paid influencers. It's all designed to try and switch public opinion, and can even be used to influence elections.
And it's very interesting. So Emerald Robinson, of course, is a friend and is on Lindell TV. She is one of the few conservatives who stood up against the mandates, refused the shot, lost her job, all of that stuff. And she's been very consistent. She has not changed. She is the same as she was as far as going after the truth. And it was fascinating when she started questioning Scott Presler's approach, not him as a person, not whether or not we like him or whatever, his approach. All of this stuff that you're talking about, the utilization of AI and bot account came swarming on her. And I mean, she lost a couple 100,000 followers during that time because of the influence of what you're talking about. And again, the reason this matters is it's not organic. This is not what people are thinking, but they get conditioned as you're talking about, and they start to think maybe they're not thinking right because all these other people think something completely different. And when it comes to Scott Presler, it's wild to me how much protection there is over his bad ideas. We're not allowed to talk about his bad ideas. And if you do, you get a phone call. You get a phone call either from him or his handlers or someone from TPUSA saying, what are you doing? Why are you saying this? Why are you acting this way? We all need to unify. We're not going to unify over this bad idea. And there's more to it than that, too. So take us into the next bit of this. Why is this so detrimental when we're looking at, we've heard from President Trump, we know that we're pursuing paper ballot, hand count, voter ID, one-day elections. What's the nefarious nature of this? I don't want to say it's a movement because it's not organic, but what is the ultimate goal of what seems to be a psychological mission, really, to promote ideas that will not secure our election?
Well, that's a really, really good question. And I did an interview recently with an individual who was close to Scott Presler, worked with him, did several rallies. And I just want to read his direct quote because it's just short, but it answers your question exactly. And this is what he alleges of Scott Presler. He says, Presler's job was to distract, to bleed money from the movement, to subvert fair elections by pushing schemes that only help the cheaters, i.e. early voting, and dismissing the real manipulation while giving the illusion that it is helping. Then when they steal it again, use it to further demoralize the people, combine that with this push for voter registration, and Presler creates an inventory of usable registrations to justify injecting ballots. It's all a setup for the magic show, our elections. So that covers a couple key points. We talked a little bit about the registrations. Presler, I don't know if you have that graphic, but he made several claims in Pennsylvania. He claimed, we registered 50,000 voters. The problem with that claim is his number two employee at Early Vote Action made a claim just 9 days earlier that they in summary registered 10,000 voters. So some people close to Presler said that's impossible to go from 10,000 voters to 50,000 voters in just 9 days. And Presler's used that number before, that 50,000. So it's just inflating those numbers. If you look at the data, some of this is in what I sent you as well, again, from Audit the Vote, they were talking about the increase in Republican registrations by presidential election cycle. And there's a graph on there. It's the kind of the red one with the bar chart. That one basically shows that in 2016, there was an increase of registrations of almost 319,000. But then in 2020, it dropped. There was increase in registrations in 288,000. But then the 2024 increase was only 246,000. So you're seeing a decrease in the overall number of registrations. So it's counter to what Presler is saying. if they're registering so many people, why are the net new registrations going down? How is that possible? And the other claim that Pressler made in Pennsylvania was over the Amish. I mean, he was claiming, oh, we've registered so many Amish people, and it's the data just doesn't show that. First of all, there aren't that many Amish, specifically in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and then of the population of Amish, through several sources, about 50% of that population is under the age of 18. They're not able to vote. The Amish religion has historically discouraged voting. So, some do, but many do not. And the data shows in the total votes cast in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there was not an increase. There was not any significant increase. Yeah, that's the increase in Republican registrations by presidential election cycle from Audit to Vote PA. And it just shows that registrations are going down. So if Scott Pressler is so effective in making all these claims, if these claims are true, how are they going down so much? And then specifically in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the total vote counts for President Trump, for example, those didn't change. His margin of winning stayed about the same. There was no significant increase. So if truly
that's true, that's true for the nation at large. That's true for the nation at large. Dr. Frank has done some great work on this, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to grab the graphic, but
that's okay.
The numbers didn't change from 2020 to 2024. People were determined they were going to vote for Trump. Let's get out the vote nonsense. Again, I'm not offended by it. I think local GOPs should be doing everything they can on a local level, rally your communities, absolutely, but to raise millions and millions of dollars to promise outcomes that are, have already been proven, it's not going to happen over and over, but keep thinking if you just, I love this. I mean, Brian, they gave us like the worst tagline ever, just vote harder, daddy. Like it's you just got to vote harder. That is insanity. The numbers haven't changed. People who are participating, and they're not doing anything that is moving the dial. And I think it's just the reality of people who want to be a part of the process versus people who do not. It's just the way it is. And the people who, by the way, I suppose we can get into this a little bit, when they are registering voters, the majority of those voters, I think it was less than 10% of the voters who were coerced to register under the Scott Pressler type model, less than 10% actually showed up to vote on election for that election cycle. Less than 10%.
Right.
So now you've provided another 90% of all these voters' names to be in the system to be utilized for who? Well, I mean, what did we just see happen in Wisconsin?
Well, there's a lot of fraud in Wisconsin. And since you bring that up, there's a couple quotes on the Wisconsin fraud. It was widely reported that about 10% of all the registrations in Wisconsin were not living at the address they were registered at. And over 141,000 of those had actually moved out of the state permanently. Another 197,000 were registered in the wrong county, and 90,000 were registered at vacant addresses. There's Derek Evans reported nearly 5,000 illegal voter registrations on Milwaukee's voter rolls, and the city election commission refused to investigate them. So I don't know how Scott Pressler can claim, there's no fraud. He made a very public claim there was no fraud in Pennsylvania. There's no evidence of it. Yet we have this evidence of registration fraud, and in Wisconsin, the same thing. And actually, Pressler he joined in on that, saying, what is this registration fraud? We need to get this fixed. A lot of people heard Elon Musk's and Doge's report that over 2 million social security numbers are being used by illegals, and they are registering and they are voting. So, for example, the Lancaster County, Pennsylvania Senate race, the margin of victory was only about, 450 votes, something like that. So did 500 illegal aliens that got social security numbers and ID cards, did they vote by mail? And is that what happened? Because how can we say that that's not happening when there's clearly proof and evidence that it is?
I think one of the things too, some of the kind of the biggest moments that continue to elevate Pressler's movement. And again, the reason for people who are watching, we're not going after Pressler as a personality. Do whatever you do. Go clean up neighborhoods. I love that. Go get back to doing that. But this narrative that he's driving is destructive for securing our election platforms in America. President Trump has not said early voting. President Trump has not said go chase ballots. President Trump has not endorsed those techniques or tactics. And what we always said from the beginning at the Lindell Offense Fund, Cause of America, Election Crime Bureau, was that if you continue to say that this is an avenue for victory, we are going to continue to lose. That's all there is to it, because it sets up a false narrative that allows for the votes to be stolen by those who are buying into your nonsense, registering to vote but never casting a ballot, setting up their ballot to be used and utilized by nefarious actors. And we've watched it happen over and over and over again. And there has to come a point where, here's been my experience too, Brian, is Scott Presler cannot take any constructive criticism about his approach and his tactics. And believe you me, our team has tried. I'm really hoping to connect you with Colonel Sean Smith. I've watched that play out both on X and in real life. And, for whatever reason, Scott Presler can be really vitriolic about what he's doing and the great sacrifice and the great work he's doing. I mean, it makes me personally sick, because I know people who've actually really sacrificed a lot. I love that. Again, I'm not diminishing what he's done in the cities and drawing attention, but it seems to all be attention for himself. And I think one of the demonstrations of that, you have a video up, actually, the 2.5 million views of a Susan Crawford supporter caught on a Ring doorbell smoking, cursing, and looking for a deceased voter in Wisconsin. That was Scott's employee with Early Vote Action, and he later admitted that he fired her. He gets an unbelievable promotion, and he gets unbelievable passes when they massively screw up. We're literally I expect a phone call after this, to be quite honest with you. And I just, he gets passes that nobody else gets. He gets support that nobody else gets, and over losing strategies. So do you think, really, in your heart of hearts, do you think this is a nefarious thing, or do you think it's just someone who's misguided, who thinks he's doing a good work, loves the popularity of it, loves that people adore him? And, and I mean, I don't know how much he gets paid. He would say he doesn't keep anything for himself. That's what he has said publicly. Whatever, we'll go with that. Because I'm not here to disparage him as a person, but this technique, this approach, it's not working. And yet he's being propped up and supported to keep it going.
Right. And let's talk about, some of the claims that Presler made. So we gave a couple examples of claims that he made that were proven to be false. But when people question Mr. Presler on X, they always get blocked. MJ Truth Ultra, who has about, 900,000 followers, was questioning Presler about the election fraud and mail-in ballots. And it seemed to be, he had screenshots in a very polite way. And Presler blocked him. First he sent him a nasty message, and then he blocked him. And if you look at, some of the posts on mine and others, there's just hundreds and hundreds of MAGA patriots that are saying, I'm blocked by Presler. Here's a screenshot. He blocked me about a year and a half ago, just for questioning him. Anyone that questions him. So, I mean, you have to say at some point, if there's nothing to hide, why are you blocking anyone that questions you, including extremely large, popular influencers on social media? It just seems strange. So we've gone through some examples of him making false statements that have been proven to be false. Let's look a little bit at his financials. There's a couple articles that I sent to you. One is his PAC, Early Vote Action. Do you have that graphic or?
Yeah. So I do apologize, Brian, but the mechanism that we were sending those through was not pulling up on my laptop. So I'm having to literally resend while we're.
Is it helpful if I put it in the chat, the StreamYard chat? Is that helpful? Okay, let me do it, because I created a Word doc on that. So let's see. I think I can.
I wish you had the ability just to share. That would be great. I'm not sure how to do that.
Yeah, I think on StreamYard it doesn't allow me to, but let me pull this up. Well, and so it's you might be able to pull up even faster than me. If you go to my X profile, the articles tab on the right hand side. So maybe I'll just talk you through it.
Yeah.
So go to the article.
This is live, and this is live, and it really is important. It's important you guys see this stuff firsthand, so you're not just taking our word. It is really, really important. Okay, so articles on the left-hand tab.
So the articles tab in X under my profile. So if you're on my Brian Ference 1, there's an articles link. It's next to media. You should be able to see it. And then there's a few articles, and there's one, and it talks real quickly about Scott Pressler's PAC and some of the donations he's got. I can put it in the chat.
Got it.
You got it? Okay.
Got it. Okay. So we're looking at, which thing are we looking at now?
We're looking at the donations to his Early Vote Action PAC in 2022 and 2023, or 2023 and 2024.
Okay. How far down do I need to go?
Let's see.
Take it in?
Yes. So.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, guys. So this is, again, everything can be found under @BrianFerence1 on X, okay?
Right. And so that one, let's see, there's a specific graphic actually, which is just a screenshot of the FEC filings. I don't know if it's in that one. Okay, yeah, go down a little bit more. Yeah, so that's one of them. And then that's actually an old version. So let's see, let me get you the new one. But it's basically now almost $700,000 that his Early Vote Action PAC has received. And some of the concerning donations are actually from two members of the Rockefeller family. But let me put in StreamYard just this specific link. It'll be easier for you to get to that one.
That sounds good. And then again, I would just want to say to people, because I don't get on this train of everybody's a bad actor and everybody's trying to do something bad. What's popular at the time that's being pushed and endorsed by one of the largest grassroots organizations that's making a massive effort across the country, Turning Point, people are trying to work together. They're trying to move the dial. And Scott Pressler is saying, I have a plan that's going to work. It's going to do great. And so you see all these organizations in those, in the FEC filings, you're seeing organizations. I mean, General Flynn's organization partnered with Scott Pressler. I just want to be clear. This doesn't mean the organizations partnering with him are bad. Everybody is looking for a solution and has been looking for a solution. So I just want to put that out there because I don't like when we go full on everybody's, what do they say, conservative ink? No, not everybody is conservative ink. Some people really were looking for a solution. And, if you didn't understand from the beginning that this approach was not going to work, you may have bought into it because clearly he is persistent and clearly he's being trained in what to say and how to say it. Everybody loves Scott Pressler. I mean, try to find somebody who's been to one of his events who will allow you to say one nefarious thing about him or one questionable thing about him. I've been on the phone with people and been like, I don't know about this. When I heard about the Virginia legislature situation, I mean, that was shut down so fast, it made my head spin. And I was like, so you guys remember, for example, when the Democrats were, they had the little aide did his porno stunt on the congressional floor and taped it and just totally desecrated the House, just disgusting, appalling behavior. Well, that happened with one of the Virginia legislative aides named Scott Pressler. But we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to talk about it. It gets shut down immediately. And that was just a kid being, a young kid. Listen, I've been young, but I never felt the need to film porn on the legislative House floor. I mean, it just never occurred to me. So I find it interesting that he gets passes that other people don't, and it's actively shut down. I mean, I've tried to be fair about this, but I don't think it's fair. I don't think we're coming from
right.
For whatever reason, we're not coming from an equal opportunity venture here for whatever reason.
Right.
Okay,
and if you look at those two links I sent you, one of them is the PAC one, and it shows in 2023 and 2024, he received $6.8 million donated to his PAC that they raised. Yeah, scroll down just a little bit. A little bit more. And there is just under that, I think. Yeah, they're right there. That's the graphic.
There we go.
So that's
a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And then the second link I sent you, it's looking at who are some of the top contributors to his PAC, Early Vote Action. The top one, of course, is Elon Musk donated $1 million to his PAC, which is a shocking amount. But then more concerning under that is that there's two separate donations from the Rockefellers. And this is
I'm
you
pulling
can.
that one up right now.
Okay, yeah, let's look at that one.
Pulling that one up
Just while you're doing that, the Rockefellers are not really what we would call grassroots supporters. They don't just donate to good causes. I mean, their family is alleged to be, into everything that's the New World Order: control the Federal Reserve, control big pharma, control population control, eugenics, the vaccine, corruption of the education system. I mean, there's very specific examples through their charities and through their influence through like Chase Manhattan Bank. So just a lot of examples. They're not good. So there's two screenshots there, and if you click on one of them, like the left one, it should enlarge. Okay, so this is showing William Rockefeller donated $18,000, and then close that if you wouldn't mind, and go to the other screenshot. Or I think you can right arrow it. This is a much larger one. This is $100,000 donated from Lacine Rockefeller. If you look at her occupation, it also shows Winrock International, which is, of course, a Rockefeller company. So $100,000 donation and $118,000. And usually donations of that size, they usually require an in-person meeting. Usually those donors would meet with the organization or their CEO, and they'd say, we're thinking of donating. We want to make sure, the money's going to be used a certain way. Okay, now we're going to donate. And maybe the check is handed to them personally. So how did Scott Presler end up in a room with the Rockefellers? How did that meeting happen?
I mean, if I'm playing devil's advocate for a minute, sometimes there are weird situations, where you just have people who've kind of gone off the reservation because it has been a time unlike any others, and people are losing money, they're losing wealth, they're losing advancement. Sometimes politics makes for strange bedfellows. Is that possible?
That's possible, but then let's talk a little bit more about some of his other financials, and a lot of this is linked, but it was pretty famously known that Scott Presler received a free vehicle, and it was actually extremely expensive. It was $100,000 vehicle, and there's screenshots of the receipt, and Scott Presler picking it up and all that stuff. I think it was a GoFundMe originally. So the fans of his raised $100,000, over $100,000, and bought him a GM diesel Suburban, which was extremely expensive, $100,000. There was a recent article that was written. It's in one of my articles as well. It was by CA Club India, and they do a lot of stuff about net worth and articles about taxes, things like that. So the individual that wrote that article, he estimated that Scott Presler's net worth was $4 million. He called out that he inherited a $550,000 house in Orlando, Florida. Scott Presler is also known to have an apartment in downtown Pittsburgh, and allegedly has another home in Pennsylvania that I believe he's selling currently. So, I mean, his PAC is making a lot of money. Prior to that, Charlie Kirk publicly pledged to support Scott Presler and door knocking and registration with $5 million. So I'm a little bit unclear if that actually was delivered to Scott Presler or not. Turning Point has donated to his PAC. Those were about $60,000 donations, but I believe that pledge was made before his PAC was formed. So I'm unclear if what form that $5 million took. So if you add $5 million and $7 million, now you're at $12 million. So this is not a homeless dog walker that picks up trash. This is someone who is getting paid a large amount of money. Other individuals close to me have mentioned that he's probably making a large amount of money as an ex-content creator. And if you look, he has 2.2 million followers. So I believe that's true. He could be making up to $20,000 a month as an ex-content creator. And there's good.
Well, here's the thing, because again, I want to bring a little bit of balance to this, because being in this world, people, if you're doing well at all, people will call you a grifter. They'll say you're doing all these things because it's very hard for people who've had everything taken from them, or they feel like their lives have been destroyed in this movement and all the work that they've done, to lose everything and then see certain people like, whoa, they're like really prospering. That is unsettling in this arena, because this isn't a business. Like, this is not a business that you should be making money off of, grassroots efforts. And I agree with that. In the content creation world, you can make a massive amount of money based on your volume of who's actually following you. So that is legitimate. And if he built that, which if it's organic and he built that audience, I just want to say this, I think he has every right to capitalize on that, make money off that, totally fine. You want to do that, that's fine. Where we get into the problem again, I want to go back to where we started, and we are running out of time. Brian, this has been an unbelievable conversation, and I want you to come back again because we're going to break down a little bit more. This is my first introduction really to all of this, and I'm not trying to be the apologeticist, but I have been on the side of people saying horrific things about myself personally, and I felt like, gosh, it's really unfair. Where I'm going with all of this is advocating for practices that do not work. The data shows they don't work. You're unteachable. You're not coachable. You won't back away from techniques and strategies that do not work. You're using AI and bots to silence everybody else from questioning you about anything. And you continue to generate millions of dollars to advance an idea that is losing, only to come out and say, vote harder, daddy. And he deserves to be called out on the floor and to have to give a defense for what he's doing. But you and I both know he won't do that. As you've demonstrated, he shuts down. MJ Ultra is a massive account, and everybody loves that account. And he blocks that account instead of giving a defense for what he's doing. And I love the private messages that come first too, by the way. You know, it's very bizarre. Stand on your work and what you've done, unless if it's the problem is you can't.
Right. And I think you summarized it, really well. And what we're getting into is, the false claims that were disproven, the techniques that don't work, that are really what the establishment and what the deep state wants. Is they don't want us to fix our elections. They want us to focus on, ballot chasing, ballot harvesting, early voting, registrations, because that's the system that it's built into. So we're gonna use the existing system that's caused all these problems to fix the problems. I don't think so. We need to be fixing elections, like President Trump has said. Switch to no more mail-in ballots unless it's like for very specific reasons. You need to apply for a mail-in ballot. One-day voting, paper ballots, hand counted, like many other countries successfully do. And I mean, there's been proof and evidence of vote flipping that happens all the time. It looks like that might have happened in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where you had a large number of Republican ballots returned. They did turn out. It was, again, another lie by Pressler that we didn't turn out. We did in normal off-election year numbers. And then we're expected to believe those Republicans voted for the Democrat candidate when the Democrats have the lowest popularity that they've maybe ever had. It just doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is maybe some vote switching, some illegal aliens voting, all that's been documented and proven.
Brian, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Brian Ference, go find him, guys, at MAGA Mind Host. The conversations are very enlightening, and I really appreciate that you're just getting down to the actual data of what's going on and refuting the argument that this is a way to win and a pathway to victory. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking all the punches, because I know it's not fun, but you seem to be thriving. So thank you so much, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. So we are going to be coming back with our next special guest in just a few moments here. Tune in on X America News right here on X and all of our platforms on America.